Hey everybody, John chapter 9 is where we're going to get our study kicked off that you may believe, our survey of the Gospel of John. We're going to hear Jesus down here in the city of Jerusalem. That's where he's been here for the last couple of sessions of our study. We're going to hear him ask in John chapter 9 verse 35, do you believe in the Son of Man? We've run across that question a lot throughout this study, right? In fact, that is why John has written what he has written, so that you and I can answer that question. Yes, we do believe that Jesus is the Son of Man. But in order to understand who he's talking to and why it matters, we've got to begin in John chapter 9, verse 1. As Jesus passed by, he's in the temple complex right there in Jerusalem. And as he's walking through, he saw a man blind from birth. I don't know about you, but that's hard for me to even imagine. Never being able to see. And Jesus' disciples are right there with him. They ask him, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? That must be the explanation, right? Otherwise he wouldn't have been born blind. Someone must have sinned. But Jesus says, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We also have run across this language a lot in our study, right? Signs provided in order that we might believe. Jesus says we must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, we heard it in John chapter 8, we hear it again here in John chapter 9. I am, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, Jesus spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. The man did it. He washed, and for the first time in his life, he could see. The neighbors in verse 8 and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said it is he. Others said, no, it is just someone like him. The blind man who could now see kept saying, I am the man, which means everybody had the same question. Then how were your eyes opened? The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? And that formerly blind man, he didn't know. But as you can imagine, we've already picked up on in John's gospel, not everyone believes. In fact, some hate Jesus to the point of wanting to stop him by any means necessary. And so some bring the man who had been blind to the Pharisees. It was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees asked him how he had received his sight. And he explains again. To which the Pharisees say, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. They're not going to pay any attention to the sign. But there are some there who say, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. So the Pharisees said again to the blind man, what do you say about him, since he has opened your eyes? And the man born blind says, he is a prophet. They call his parents. They want to hear from them, verifying this, in fact, is your son. But they are afraid, John tells us in John chapter 9. They know that the Pharisees have said, if anyone begins confessing and following Jesus, they're going to be thrown out of the synagogue. And so they say, this is our son, but you're going to have to talk to him. And so in verse 24, for the second time, the Pharisees call the man who had been blind, and they call him to give glory to God. We know that this man, this Jesus from Nazareth, is a sinner. The once blind man says, whether he's a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. They challenge him. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And the blind man in verse 27 says, I've told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why? Do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? And they reviled him. They looked down on him, put him down. You are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from. And the blind man says, why, this is an amazing thing. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. The man believes the sign. Listen, verse 33, if this man, if Jesus from Nazareth were not from God, he could do nothing. And the Pharisees say, you were born in utter sin. Would you teach us? And they cast him out. And this is where we began with John 9:35. Jesus heard that they had cast this man, once blind, out, and Jesus finds him. And he asks, do you believe? Do you believe in the Son of Man? The once blind man says, who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus says to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. The man says, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped Jesus. Jesus said in verse 39, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not yet see may see, and those who see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, are we also blind? To which Jesus responded, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. The problem is they weren't blind. The problem is they could see. They could see the signs, and yet they refused to believe, which is why Jesus says, your guilt remains. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Week after week after week, John is bringing us to the point where we've got to ask, do I believe? Do you believe? How does John chapter 9 help us? Let's talk about it. Thanks so much for being in class. Hope you have a great rest of your class and a great start to this new week.